Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. And yes, being it's Saturday, we are getting back to our Medicaid series. But before we do, the very brief disclaimers and the trigger warnings. We'll start out with, obviously, you're noticing voice is a little different. Allergies are acting up definitely today. I apologize for that in advance. It's a bit interesting. The pollen out here is trying to kill me. I'm pretty convinced. Anyways, let's get straight to it, folks. For every single one of these videos we are doing within our Medicaid series, you are going to see the links to everything we go over right there in the description box, including the documentation that we are going to be going through today and probably for the next several videos in regards to this subject. So, if you want to read for yourself or if you would like to follow along by any chance, please feel free to do so. I always include it every single video series that I do. To the trigger warnings. Folks, we do have this channel marked not for kids for a reason. We do use profanity, and of course, we do cover some pretty dark topics on this channel, such as regards to Agape Boarding School at the Judge Rothberg Educational Center, Circle of Hope, and Tobin World. So if you have a child, they're 16 and younger, and they are watching this, very obviously parental supervision is very much advised. Also over here at Spilling Tea, this is very much amateur hour when it comes to this particular form of social media platform. And that's when I feel like being generous and nice to myself. I do not have any bells and whistles. I do not know how to edit out things such as sneezes or when I need to go and pick something up once I have somebody delivering me something through the door. So I'm apologizing for that in advance. What can I say? I'm getting old. And as I'm getting more and more stubborn, and how due to the folks that are currently in power on both sides in this country, I'm getting more and more series. I'm having to open up and diving into more and more topics that the general public is not really given enough information on, in my opinion. So I'm going to go ahead and apologize for that in advance as well. Now, what we are focusing on right now in regards to our Medicaid series has to do specifically with Medicaid's role in housing, the funding from Medicaid that goes into such things as covering cost for renovations. If you are someone, if you're in a wheelchair, or you are someone with cerebral palsy, you have some mobility issues, the funding that it takes in order to renovate a home to make it more accessible and friendly for those who need it is not cheap. As a person who used to work for my state, the Missouri Department of Mental Health Southwest Region, under the Division of Developmental Disabilities, as their advocacy specialist there, just seeing previously in passing the cost of putting a guardrail inside a shower about exploded my brain. So that's just an example of some of the things we're going to be speaking about here. This is also some of the funding that is under threat right now by the GOP with the insane chainsaw cuts they intend to make, making things that much more difficult for those of us for whom things are already extremely difficult. So, we left off right underneath the table, lead abatement. In one moment. Again, sorry for throat noises, I can't help it, allergies. In 2017, CMS released a set of frequently asked questions on HSI funds that states can use to pay for certain public health activities, such as lead abatement. This is particularly true out here, folks. I was talking about it last time we did a video on this series. Missouri was very much a lead mining state, especially talking late 1800s into the early 1900s. So this is something we have to be particularly hyperly vigilant about here, especially since we've got so many underground caves at different places. Yeah, that is something we do have to keep an eye on. Just saying. Dust hazards. Let me continue to read here. Allowable lead abatement activities include removal, enclosure, or encapsulation of lead-based paint, and lead dust hazards. The removal and replacement of surfaces or fixtures which can include water service lines and other fixtures, identified during an environmental investigation as lead hazards, the removal or covering of soil lead hazards, and training to ensure there is sufficient number of qualified workers to complete lead abatement activities. Alright, now, relevant Medicaid authorities for covering housing-related services. Now we're going to start getting into the details here. One moment, sorry. States can use several different federal authorities to pay for housing-related services, particularly for individuals transitioning to the community from institutional settings. This was still a big thing when I was still working with the state. I had a role, and I was one of the individuals that was speaking to several groups of folks that were coming out of the institutional setting as the state institutions were getting kind of closed one by one, starting with some of the oldest out in the Sedalia area part of my state. And it was integrating them into getting them involved and applied for things such as Section 8 housing through HUD, and being able to go from there, getting them into assisted living situation. Now, HUD and Medicaid had to work together, and primarily in regards to that, it was mainly HUD funding, but in regards to those places that did need some renovating, because you had individuals who did need a little bit of help in regards to making a place a bit more friendly to those who with some mobility issues. Yeah, there was a lot of work that had to be done. Actually, one of them is where I have one of my aunts living now, which is the Frisco building downtown here. It used to be an old, like 1900s era fire station. It was still in pretty good shape, so me as well as some others from my office went over acting on, well, the kind of act as consultants in regards to what they were looking to do, the things that they needed to look for in regards to renovating them, so those who do have some mobility issues would be able to access the entirety of their apartments. So that's the sort of things we're talking about here. Counter spaces that are easily accessible to individuals who are within wheelchairs, or who need it a little bit lower for those who maybe have cerebral palsy. It's a little bit more difficult to reach up into higher places. You kind of get where we're going there, right? Okay, good. This section describes various authorities and provides examples of how states are using them to provide housing supports and services. money follows the person demonstration. Now, as you can see here, this is what I'm talking about. This was a large push during the early 2000s. And again, I acted first consulting, not in a professional manner, but as a constituent representative. I was a part of what was known as the Southwest PAC, a group of us, including parents, caseworkers, and people who are disabled, come together to discuss how best to use the funding to help and assist in different programs so we can make sure it follows the person into assisted living, whatever that situation needs to be. Okay, I'm going to read and stop dragging you all in the left field again. The money follows the person MFP demonstration authorized by the Deficit Reduction Act of 2005, DRA, has provided $3.7 billion to 43 states and the District of Columbia to help Medicaid. Beneficiaries transition from institutions back to the community. This was really starting to come with more and more success circa 2017. We still have individuals that have come from those institutions that were still working as far as helping to take care of housing and accommodations to make living spaces more accessible. It's not cheap, and we're talking about quite a few people. Not as much as the media likes to scaremonger you all into believing, but a decent amount nonetheless. And it is very much a feat of engineering and a whole bunch of different entities having to work together. Until recently, eligibility was limited to Medicaid beneficiaries residing in an institution for 90 days or more, not counting short-term rehabilitation days. Now, that was very true when I was still working for the state in regards to what they're talking about here. Anything else, such as the programs that I was involved in with my own assisted living apartment at the time, that was funded strictly through HUD by means of Section 8. However, the individuals that assist me in filling out my Medicaid application and helping me get approved also were very kind to help me also be able to apply to and get approved for that Section 8 funding. So that's what I mean when I say a lot of these places work very tightly together. Right? Okay. The Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 reduced the minimum stay requirement of 60 consecutive days in an institutional setting, which may include days admitted for short-term rehabilitative services. So we're talking about something more along the lines, not so much institutions as we are talking about like psychiatric units. We have one here in town that's actually run by borough themselves for emergency situations. I haven't seen a longer stay there than about 2 weeks or so, and then afterwards they go back to their regular outpatient and to what the regular supports would be, but that's kind of what they're talking about there, rehabilitative services, where it's not really a long-term stay. Beneficiaries receive additional home and community-based services, HCBS, under the demonstration beyond what is provided under a state's existing HCBS programs, including housing supports. MFP states have also partnered with public housing authorities to provide housing choice vouchers to beneficiaries, which can be used to secure housing within the community. More than 101,000 people with chronic conditions and disabilities transition from institutions back into the community through MFP programs between 2008 and 2019. See, that's what I'm talking about right there. 2008 was when I first obtained my position with my state inside the Department of Mental Health, and this was just happening, just had been approved. And yeah, there was like so many meetings. 6 months of solid meetings, providing resources, meeting with parents, meeting with centers for independent living and people first, and going over all this information back in the day. Oof. And then 6 months of nothing but speaking at conference after conference after conference. Anyway, sorry. The program was set to expire at the end of 2018. However, Congress authorized new funding through fiscal year 2023. States can roll over unused funds for subsequent fiscal years. Therefore, FY 2023 funds will be available for expenditures through FY 2027. So we're coming up on the deadline here, folks. And if anybody thinks that the current administration in power is actually going to allow that program to continue unabated, I got a bridge I can sell you. And don't forget that oceanfront property out in Kansas that I will sell you for a penny. Alright, let me continue here. That is the type of funding, though, that is currently under threat, okay? And helping these folks either transition out of an institutional setting, and before I have a bunch of MAGA morons come and start their crap inside my comment section, allow me to elaborate. When we are using the word transition here within its full context, that means transitioning literally from an institution into community-based housing. Kind of like when I use terms such as transition age services, that is referencing going from being a high schooler and having those more school supports and everything there, into transitioning over into adult services with assistance in regards to housing, health care, going into the workforce, or going into secondary education, what those supports need to look like, right? Because we live in this world now, and now I have to elaborate every single time because nobody wants to take 2 seconds to actually process what they just read. They just want to see that word transition and turn into a frothing at the mouth freaking parody of themselves. So, when we use that word, and we're talking about these sorts of things, that's what we are meaning. God. Sorry, folks. Another trigger warning I forgot. I am not kind to either side of our political spectrum, because neither side of the political spectrum are kind to those of us who are disabled or any way, shape, or form, any kind of other. So, yeah, just know that. Alright, now, section 1115, waiver demonstrations. Several states cover housing-related activities or services for Medicaid beneficiaries through demonstration waivers authorized under Section 1115 of the Social Security Act. Such demonstrations are initially approved for 5 years and must be budget neutral, meaning that federal spending under the waiver cannot exceed what it would have been in the absence of the waiver. Home Section 1115 demonstrations, including those in Illinois and New Jersey, focus on addressing housing insecurity for high-cost, high-need beneficiaries, such as individuals with serious mental illness. Other demonstrations, including those in California and North Carolina, are broader efforts to address housing, as well as other social detriments of health, such as nutrition, transportation, and interpersonal violence. Now, these are the things that I'm not quite as familiar with, but if you are interested in learning more in this particular area, I do recommend NAMI, that is NAMI, and they are the folks who are the advocates in regards to the rights for those of us with mental health issues. They tackle things such as housing, medical insurance. They are a very, very great resource. If you type them into Google, it should automatically go ahead and pop up there for you. Alright, let me continue. Under the Medi-Cal 2020 demonstration, California provides housing supports to certain beneficiaries through its whole person care pilots. Now that started about around 2016. I was already out of my position at the state during that time period. I left there around 2013, but I did keep an eye on it. I'm just not as well versed in it as I am in some other areas. Depending on the design of the pilot program, eligible beneficiaries can receive housing-based care management and tenancy supports, including assistance in finding and securing housing, coverage for certain move-in costs, and minor home modifications. Now, mine was covered through HUD. Most of the folks out here usually have that area covered by HUD. Now, it doesn't cover the more small incidental costs. I was lucky, and the person that was the manager for my assisted living apartments was a sweetheart that had a little gift basket there with things like toilet paper and cleaning and things of that nature, and had a microwave in there waiting for me. But yeah, California, can you bring that here to my state? I know a lot of folks who could really use that kind of help. I'd like to import that, please. A majority of the 25 pilot programs offer such services to individuals at risk of or experiencing homelessness and those with a demonstrated medical need for housing and supported services, such as individuals with behavioral health needs. Services are delivered in coordination with managed care organizations, the Public Housing Authority, and community-based organizations. Like out here, a lot of the churches that got together, especially during 2020, in regards to help the homeless get housed, get them off the streets, and help them be a little bit less at risk. And they did buy that old hotel and completely renovated and got some people in there that way. The main funding, though, was coming from the churches and the charities, but the Public Housing Authority assisted in getting guys in there that could act quickly, get the renovation done, make sure that it was safe, so they could get these people into some safe housing, and also keep them off the streets while everybody was essentially in quarantine. Pilot programs may also connect beneficiaries to permanent housing opportunities through the use of county-wide housing pool. In Los Angeles County, which administers the largest pilot, 60% of program funding is targeted to individuals who are experiencing or at risk of homelessness, many of whom have behavioral health conditions. Again, that is awesome. I would like to import a program like that out here. There's a lot of individuals, especially our older folks with developmental disabilities, who do unfortunately end up homeless. And we do have the kitchen, and there's another old hotel downtown that we open up on a nightly basis to at least house some of these folks for a small amount of time, but we need a lot more help in addressing the issue. I'm glad to see that California is really leading, at least in this area, in regards to that type of programming. there is a disturbing amount of our homeless out here, especially, who are either they're veterans and they're people with disabilities or mental health issues, or they're all three. And yeah, no, it's a problem. It's a problem. I know they've been working on addressing it, but I can also tell you these cuts that the GOP are sitting there considering back and forth every day, hanging over our necks like the eternal sword of Damocles, is not making anybody less nervous right now, especially those who are our most vulnerable. I can tell you that. Section 1915, managed care waivers. Okay, I'm going to see how, okay, this is brief, so we're going to go ahead and go over this real quick, and then we're going to go ahead and close out for today. So, Section 1915, managed care waivers. States can use savings achieved under Section 1915 waivers to provide additional services, including housing-related services to beneficiaries enrolled in managed care. In some states, this includes services to help beneficiaries with disabilities. We're talking help in regards to costs for direct care workers, nursing, things of that nature. Older adults needing LTSS and those experiencing chronic homelessness identified transition to and sustain housing. For example, under a Section 1915 waiver, North Carolina offers Medicaid coverage for supportive services that help individuals with serious and persistent mental illness transition into the community. Individuals with mental health needs to substance use disorders may use peer supports as part of an individualized recovery services aimed at developing skills for housing, employment, and self-management. The waiver also specifically provides authority for Medicaid coverage of transitional living skills such as housekeeping, shopping, laundry services for children under age of 21 with certain behavioral health diagnoses. I do love to see absolutely all of that, and I know we've been working on it literally since the mid-2000s, but folks, the reason why I am going over all of this is because these programs, these waivers, all the different parts, the different programs and areas that Medicaid funding goes to is under threat right now. Those cuts they are meaning to make are not being done by individuals who have a clear understanding of exactly where all of that Medicaid funding is going. Most people generally don't, unless you are either a consumer that's been within the service system, like myself, or you are a person who have worked within the service system, also myself, and other of us out there, right? What's at risk here is not just a bunch of people losing health care and access to mental health programs, medicines, what have you. Although that is more than enough horrifying for me and for you. But it's threatening a whole lot of programs. The work and effort that has gone into creating these safe housing opportunities for some of the most vulnerable of our citizens. It's cutting into the ability for those who do have mobility issues, our elderly, folks in wheelchairs, folks who are paraplegic or paralyzed, folks with cerebral palsy. It's not cheap renovating apartments so that they are more accessible for those who need them to be. Okay? If that funding is dropped in the way that they are proposing to drop it, the absolute havoc this is going to wreak on the service system could possibly be catastrophic. Okay? That's why I am taking you all through the service system. This is why I am taking you all through what different things that Medicaid funding covers, so that you have a better idea of what exactly is at risk, and also so that you understand when these GOP morons go on the media and tell you, oh, but those who really need the services are going to be fine. Nothing's going to happen to their services. It's just for fraud. Bullshit. Bullshit. That's not how the real world actually works. Okay? You do a slash and burn to Medicaid funding, it affects everyone, either directly or indirectly. Programs like the ones we're going over here shut down completely, or ran on such a skeleton crew that if it can remain at least somewhat operational and be able to provide small help at all, it's a miracle of holy God. Okay? I want these people to understand what they are doing and who exactly they are going to hurt, and just how badly they are going to damage our country if they hack into funding that is so multifaceted like this all across our nation. There is no, well, if you really need the services, you're going to be fine. It's not how funding works. If you cut it across the board, they may get services, but how many hours of services they will be approved for will be cut in half, and that's if they're being generous. Because every time there's a cut to Medicaid, there is a cut to the hourly wages of direct care staff, nursing staff. It cuts into programs like these that we're going over here. So, we're going to continue to walk you all through this specifically for that reason. I want these individuals to know exactly what they are doing and to whom they are doing it to. And on that, folks, we're going to go ahead and close out for this afternoon. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few we do get do tend to get removed from time to time. So folks, if you could, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and please, folks, don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time this afternoon. And as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea absolutely hope you have a good one. We will be back here tomorrow, about around the same time, to go again and move on to the Section 1915 Home and Community-Based Services Waivers. Goodbye, everyone.